Hey guys, Ryan from the Mavericks. This is podcast episode 19, and today we're talking about predicting sales. Oftentimes, when an entrepreneur starts a business, or when someone who wants to start a business is starting to contemplate that idea, do you know what the greatest fear they have is? I'm going to tell you from experience. The greatest fear most people have when they want to start a business is that they will fail in what they do. Why do they have that fear? They are afraid that they will lose so much money that they will not be able to get back up again. And that fear, if you were to study it, has one root cause. So we're going to look at that. So now, when you think about you want to start a business, you have the business plan and you have the cash flow analysis. And in the cash flow analysis, what you are studying is how much money you're making, how much money you're losing, and what the difference is. And that's your profit or your loss. The fear is that you will always spend more than you make. And therefore, you will lose money, your business will go into a loss, you'll become insolvent, and you'll become bankrupt, and you'll lose your house, right? That's how the fear plays out. Okay, so let's look at the cash flow analysis now. In the cash flow analysis, you have that revenue section and the cost section. In the cost section, you have the cost of goods sold, which is your cost of supplies. You have your cost of labor, and then you have your operating expense, right? So now when you start populating your cash flow analysis, the expense line items, you'll go and you'll call the supplier and say, hey, Mr. Supplier, I'm looking for some supplies to build my product. How much would it cost? And the person would give you a number and you put that in your cash flow analysis. Then the next line item for cost of labor, you'll look around, you'll see the industry average for the kind of labor that you're looking for. You'll see that it's about $20 and you'll say, you know what, I'll pay this person $23 an hour because it's going to afford it. And boom, you'll put that into your cash flow analysis. Then you'll look at your operating expenses. And you'll say, rent, I wonder how much that will cost. And you don't guess. What do? You call the landlord, right? So we call the landlord and we say, Mrs. Landlord, I want to rent from your location. How much would it cost? Boom, they give you a number. And how much would utilities be? And they give you another number. And you put those down. You contact the accountant. You tell the accountant, Mr. Accountant, I need you to do my accounting. How much would you cost? Boom, you put that down. And the accountant, you also ask the accountant, how much would taxes be estimated? And you put that number down, right? You contact your lawyer, you get that line item, you put it down. So what is happening is that you're contacting all these people, you're getting verified numbers, and you're filling out your cost line item, all right? But let's go to your revenue section. Now you go to your sales section, and you say, I need to make this many sales in order to cover all these expenses. So now you put that number in there. And then you say, you know what, I think I can probably get about 10% increase in sales every month. So this is what it's going to look like. So you do that. All right. So now you got your sales projections and you have your cost projections. But you're still afraid to start a business. This happened to me. I had my cash flow analysis. Everything was validated, or so I thought. I had all my cost line items. I had all my sales line items. And yet I was afraid to start my business. Why was I afraid? Because I did not trust my my sales projections. Let me say it again. I was afraid my business would fail because I did not trust my sales projections. I did not trust that I could get enough revenue to cover my costs. And so I thought, what if I start a business and my sales does not meet my cost requirements and I run out of money and I have to close the business? What if that happens? So what is the root cause of the fear of people starting a business? It is the fear that they cannot predict their revenue. All right? So just zone in on this. The reason most people are scared of starting a business is because they are afraid they cannot predict their revenue. They're not afraid that they can't predict their costs. For some reason, we're all so sure of the costs we put into our cash flow analysis. But for revenue, we're scared that those numbers may not be right. So I just want to study now how we predict costs and how we predict sales, and then ask ourselves the question, why are we afraid that we can't predict our sales? You know, when you look at your cost, what is happening when you try to predict your costs? You never say like, oh, I'm terrified that I can't predict my cost. I'm not sure if my cost numbers are correct. No, because you can just call the people that you're going to transact with to figure out what the costs are going to be, right? You contact the supplier, you contact the labor industry, you contact, or labor contact, you contact the landlord, the lawyer, the accountant, You contact like a small business owner and you ask for comparables. And then you're able to get pretty accurate numbers of the costs of your business. So what is happening? What did you do there? You contacted the right person at the right time, and you had an understanding, a mutual understanding of what the transaction was going to be, right? Those are the three elements. You contacted the right person at the right time, and you had a mutual understanding of what the transaction was going to be. That is why you can trust your cost number, right? Like, for example, pretend that your money is your product, okay? Let's flip the whole perspective of cost now. Let's pretend that our cost items, right? Let's pretend that that's going to be our revenue. Our product is money, so we give money, and in return, we get products, right? Just pretend we're gonna flip the script and look at costs as if it was like revenue. All right. If you were to go to a cafe, right, and you go up to the register, and there's a guy sitting there saying, okay, what can I get for your order? And you're like, here's $3,000. Cafe person would be like, what? But what's the $3,000 for? Be like, I'd like to rent a place for 1 month. Can you do that for me? The person would be like, what? Who? Like, what are you talking about? What happened? You talked to the wrong person. All right. Say you go to another place and you go to a shopping mall and you go to the landlord there and you find an empty unit and you're like, here's $3,000. And the person's like, oh, for what? I'd like to rent that unit over there, right? So now you're talking to the right person, and the person says to you, that unit over there is $10,000 a month. You're going to be like, okay, that's not going to work. So what happened? You talked to the right person who had the wrong resource for you, right? And then say you go to a really shady area, you go to a mall where it's just cash business, and you say, here's $3,000. And the person's like, oh, for what? I'd like to rent a place for a month. The person's like, sure. Takes your $3,000. You come in there the next week and that space is already occupied by someone else. Really shady area. That person took your money. Why? Because there was not a mutual understanding of the transaction involved, right? But do you see how ludicrous this is? We would never actually make these mistakes when we deal with costs. Yet, I made these mistakes when it came to projecting revenue, right? Let's look at revenue now and see how ludicrous the story is. Like imagine that I'm selling coffee now, all right? And I go to someone on the street who's running to work. I'm like, excuse me, sir, coffee? Person's like, what? I don't got time for this. And he runs past you. Talk to the wrong person. Then say you go to a coffee shop and you see a lineup of people. And you go inside and you're like, excuse me, sir, would you like a coffee? And the person's like, I'm already ordering a coffee. And you're like, I know, but I got coffee too. Could you buy it from me? Person's going to be like, what? Like, who are you? Wrong person at the wrong time, right? And then you go to someone who's very shady and you're like, excuse me, sir, would you like to buy a coffee? And you give the coffee. The person takes it, drinks, and leaves. What happened? You didn't have a mutual understanding of the transaction that was going to be involved, right? We tend to make this mistake with sales, but we don't tend to make this mistake with costs. Right? Like take, for example, the example of coffee. We might just open a coffee shop in our local region just because we want to. And yet in our region, nobody needs coffee because they're all making it at home, right? Or you might offer, so it's the wrong people. Or you might open a coffee shop in the right area, but you open it at the wrong time, right? You open it at like 10 a.m. when everyone's leaving to work at 6. So you have the right people at the wrong time or with the wrong resource. Or you say, I'm going to open up a coffee shop. I'm going to sell coffee for $10, but you're in a really low-end neighborhood. Now you're talking to the right people who want coffee. They have the right time because they want the coffee, but you don't have a mutual understanding of the transaction involved. So now they're not going to buy your coffee, right? So we tend to make mistakes in sales projections that we would never make with our cost projections. So we never fear about predicting costs, but we always fear about predicting sales. And maybe that's not everybody, but that's definitely me. I was always afraid that if I predict sales, it's going to be wrong. But if I predict costs, it's going to be right. But the methodology is the same. Why could I not predict sales the same way I could predict costs? Here's the answer. Because in the cost prediction, I have a relationship with the people I'm going to do a transaction with. But in the sales projection, I do not have a relationship with the people I'm going to make a transaction with. All right, get this. Most people, when they start a business, including me, when we start a business, we start with a product and a hazy definition of the market. And then we just go out there and try to sell. But we might be selling to the wrong people. We might be selling to the right people at the wrong time or with the wrong resource. Or we might not be having a mutual understanding of the transaction involved. And so our sales numbers are false. They're not going to work. And yet with our costs, I have a relationship with the people that I'm doing the transaction with. I call the landlord. I get an agreement with the landlord in writing. This is the unit. These are the terms. This is the cost. So now when I give my product, which is my money, they will give me their product, which is their land. I will do the same thing with labor. I will give you $23. You will give me an hour of labor. I will give you this much money. You will give me this accounting service. I will give you this much money. You will give me this legal service, right? We have all of these understandings with our suppliers in writing, but we don't have an understanding of our customers. And not specifically in writing. We just don't have a relationship with our customers as much as we have a relationship with the people that are in our expense line items, right? So what does that mean? That means that if you could just treat your customers the way you treat your cost line items, you'd be able to predict sales. Think about that. If you were to just treat your customers the way you treat your cost line items, you'd be able to predict sales. And then the fear of your business collapsing would go away. So how do you predict sales accurately, just like the way you predict costs? Well, it's the exact same way you predict costs. What you do is you do not start off with a product and a hazy definition of the market. You start off with a person that you are trying to help. And you start off with a purpose. You start off with a person that you are trying to help and a purpose, a place that you want to get them to. You develop a relationship with that person. You become one with that person. And you try to help that person on their path towards that end purpose. And they develop a relationship with you. They develop a trust in you to the point where when you understand where they're coming from and what they're going through, you then say, I've got a solution to a problem that I think you're facing, that I think you're all facing. And they'll all say, you know what? We know you. We know what you've done for us. We trust you. And that is exactly the problem I have. Let me try your solution out. Like, for example, if you say you're an early morning jogger, right? You're jogging early in the morning at about 6 a.m. And by the time you come back, you just want to stop at a coffee shop and get some coffee. And you're in a running group and you notice that all your running buddies are saying the same thing. Or say you're in cycling and all your cycling buddies land in the same spot and they all say the same thing. You're like, darn, I wish this spot had a coffee shop, man. And then you think to yourself, they trust me. They know me. I have a relationship with them. They're basically all my friends. I'll just open a small coffee stall over there. So you wake up early in the morning. You set up a coffee stall. You know the cycling route. You know the time they take the cycle. Or you know the running route. You know the time they go running. You know the time they'll land there. And they all know you. So suddenly they land there and it's like, hey guys, I got you some, hot coffee. I got some iced coffee for you. I got some refreshments for you. The stuff that we've always been looking for. And they're like, thank you so much. And then they'll buy from you. What happened? Wasn't it so obvious to open the stall over there? It was so obvious. You could predict the sale because you had a relationship with the customer. You were one with the customer. I think Patagonia had this, where the founder of Patagonia was developing like a special type of carabiner. Why? Because he was a rock climber. He was a rock climber that had the troubles that all rock climbers had. And he developed a tool that would help him in his rock climbing, right? A tool, I think, that would keep the rock from getting destroyed whenever he tried to put a pinion in. And then all of a sudden, because he had a relationship with the rock climbing community, because they all trusted him, because he was a rock climber, When he came up with the solution and told them what the outcome was, what the benefit was, they're like, oh my goodness, that's what I want. And what did they do? They jumped on that product, and Patagonia became Patagonia, right? Say, for example, you're a photographer and you have a photography club and you train people on how to take photographs. And you always notice that all your clients tend to have problems with mounting and dismounting their camera from their tripod. And you have the same problem too. And you talk amongst yourselves and you're like, I really wish I had a solution to this. And suddenly you develop a tool that helps you mount and dismount your camera really easily. And you go and you show this tool to your buddies and they're like, please make me a copy of this. And you do. What happens if you start to monetize on this? It'll start to sell because you don't have to predict the sales. You already know it's going to work. Why? It goes back to the fact that you're talking to the right people with the right at the right time, with the right resources, with an understanding of the transaction of the value you're going to make with them, right? And that comes about because you started your business off with a person and you started off understanding where you wanted to take them, right? So you developed a relationship with them, and in developing that relationship, you gave them what they were looking for, they trusted you, and then they transacted with you. So now it's ludicrously easy to predict your sales. But it's a long-term game, right? The reason we start off with a product and we want to start a business is because we think that immediately we can come up with a solution and start selling and make money. When in reality, if we really want to predict sales, it's a long game where we have to really understand who we're trying to help and why we're trying to help them. Because when we do that, then we can actually come up with solutions that we know will sell. And once that happens, you can predict sales, you can predict costs, you can open up your business, and you'll know it'll be cash flow positive because you know what the future is going to look like. So that's the summary of what I wanted to talk about to you about predicting sales. I hope you found this video helpful. Give it a thumbs up if it is. And just to recap everything we were talking about, again, most people, when they want to start a business, the reason they don't start a business is because they're afraid that their business will collapse. Why are they afraid that their business will collapse? Because they're afraid that their costs will exceed their revenue. Why are they afraid that their costs will exceed their revenue? Because they can predict their costs with surety, but they cannot predict their sales with surety. All right. Why can you predict your costs with surety? Because you were talking to the right people at the right time with the right understanding of the transaction of the value. Why can't you predict your sales with surety? Because you are not talking to your market, right? Or not you. I mean, we're not talking to our market. We're not talking to the right people. And we do not make an understanding of the transaction involved. And therefore, we're not sure if our projections are going to be correct. And so when an investor questions us on our costs, we have all the details needed for them to feel confident in our numbers for our costs. But when an investor questions us about our sales, we might hesitate because we don't have the background on those numbers. We're just guessing. And then that's where the investor backs out. And that's where we even back out of our own idea. And we're afraid to start our business, right? So what happens then is to solve this problem is to be able to project sales the way you project costs, you got to treat it like the way you treat costs. You have to talk to the right people at the right time with the right understanding of the transaction involved, which means that you got to start off with a person. You got to start off with a purpose of why you're trying to help this person, where you're trying to take them to. You need to develop a relationship with them. You need to really understand them. Then you'll understand their problems. Then the solutions will become very apparent and they will trust you because you are their friend, and you will make a solution and they will buy from you because they trust you, because they're the right people, because they have the right time and resource, and because they have a right understanding of the transaction involved. And then you'll be able to sell and predict sales. I'm in the process of this right now, right? I'm trying to better understand other entrepreneurs that are in the same part of the journey that I am when I'm starting a business. I know the fears of entrepreneurship. I go through it every day. I go through bouts of sadness. I go through bouts of doubt. I go through worries and anxiety like imposter syndrome and lack of worthiness. So I resonate with entrepreneurs. And that's my market. My market is entrepreneurs. And my purpose for helping entrepreneurs is I want them all to be millionaires. I want them to be able to supply for their families and take a vacation without worrying about business. Just like I want that for me. So I know that one day when I can achieve that, those people that I helped, they'll have a relationship with me and they'll trust me when I say I have something for them that will help them. So that's how I'm going to succeed in business. How will you succeed in business? Hopefully it's the same way I'm telling you about. So this is Ryan from the Mavericks. Thank you for joining me. This is podcast episode 19 again, and we were talking about predicting sales. I'll catch you for the next one. Take care. Oh, and sorry, before we go, remember, if you want to join the Mavericks, mavericks.goldwynandsons.com. I'll see you there. Take care.